Did you know that nearly 19 million households in the United States are living with some form of hoarding, and that seniors are among the most vulnerable? It's not just about piles of newspapers or closets crammed to the ceiling. For many older adults, it starts with something far smaller, the quiet decisions made every day to keep just one more thing. A box of birthday cards tucked away, a drawer of old gadgets that don't work anymore, a garage lined with bins meant for later. These little choices don't feel like clutter in the moment, but over time, they silently grow into barriers that crowd out safety, peace of mind, and even independence. Here's the truth most people overlook: hoarding rarely begins with visible mess. It begins with invisible habits. The decision to hold on, rather than let go. The moment when fear of loss feels stronger than the joy of space. And for seniors, that moment can happen again and again, until a home once filled with love and memory starts to feel like a storage unit. But there's another path. Small, deliberate minimalist choices can protect not just your home, but your health, your freedom, and your family from the weight of too much. If you've ever stood in a room of your own possessions and felt them pressing in, you're not alone, and you don't have to stay there. Stay with me, because today we'll uncover 7 powerful choices that can change the way you live, protect your future, and bring back the peace you deserve. And if this message already speaks to you, hit like, subscribe, and share with a friend over 60, because no senior should feel trapped by their own belongings. Let me introduce you to Seraphina Leigh, a 72-year-old retired librarian from a small town in Illinois. On the surface, her life looked perfectly ordinary. She had a tidy lawn, a cheerful smile when she met neighbors on her daily walk, and a deep love for the written word. Yet behind the door of her modest home was a story she didn't tell many people. Every room, from the hallway closet to the guest bedroom, was lined with shelves, stacks, and carefully labeled bins. At first glance, it looked organized, rows of books alphabetized, boxes stacked neatly. But as the years went on, Seraphina began to feel an unsettling truth. Her home wasn't organized, it was heavy. For decades, she justified keeping everything. As a librarian, books weren't just objects, they were her life's passion. She had collected thousands, from dusty first editions to children's stories she swore her grandchildren would one day cherish. Beyond the books, she kept letters, cards, knickknacks from vacations, even kitchen gadgets that had long lost their use. She told herself it wasn't hoarding, it was memory keeping, it was preparation, it was being practical. Just in case became her mantra, the reason behind every extra stack, every unopened box. But slowly, she began to notice something different. Walking through her home, she realized her spaces weren't comforting her anymore. They were closing in. Each shelf, though neatly arranged, carried the unspoken weight of decisions not made. Each bin was a reminder of something she hadn't let go of. She never would have called herself a hoarder. In her mind, hoarders were people on television whose homes were unlivable. But late at night, when she shuffled carefully between narrow walkways carved out between stacks, she wondered if she was on that very path. The deeper truth frightened her. What if something happened to her? Who would deal with all of this? She imagined her children, already busy with their own lives, walking into a house packed with items they neither wanted nor understood. She pictured the burden of sorting, donating, or hauling away the things she could not release. That thought alone began to weigh heavier than the shelves themselves. Yet Seraphina wasn't hopeless. She still believed change was possible, even at her age. She wanted her home to feel like a sanctuary again, not a storage space. She longed for the freedom to sit in her living room without feeling surrounded by obligations. She dreamed of hosting friends without apologizing for the stacks. Deep down, she knew she had to make new choices, different from the ones that had led her here. And so began her quiet transformation. Through trial and error, reflection, and courage, Seraphina uncovered 7 powerful minimalist choices that slowly shifted not just her home, but her entire outlook on aging, memory, and freedom. These weren't harsh rules or trendy decluttering tricks. They were mindful decisions that protected her from sliding further into the trap of hoarding, and they gave her the peace she had been missing for years. Through her journey, she discovered 7 minimalist choices that transformed her space, her peace of mind, and ultimately, her future. Choice 1. the courage to set a legacy limit. Seraphina loved books the way some people love air. They were her comfort, her identity, her history. As a librarian for more than 40 years, she believed in her heart that books were treasures worth protecting. Over time, though, her home had turned into an unofficial archive. Shelves bent under the weight of paperbacks and hardcovers. Boxes of old textbooks gathered dust in the garage. Rare editions sat untouched for decades. By the time she retired, Seraphina had over 3,000 books, many of which she had not opened in years. She told herself she was saving them for her grandchildren. One day, she whispered while dusting off a worn children's series, "They'll thank me." But here's the truth, her grandchildren didn't want them. They grew up in a world of tablets, audiobooks, and digital libraries. To them, a shelf of books wasn't a treasure trove, it was a burden. And that realization struck Seraphina like a cold wind. She wasn't preserving memories, she was preparing an inheritance of overwhelm. That fear, of burdening the people she loved most, became her turning point. She remembered the exhausting summer when she had cleaned out her parents' home after they passed. The closet stuffed with clothes, the boxes of outdated paperwork, the attic full of yellowed newspapers too important to throw away. It had taken months, and the grief was heavier because every object was another decision she had to make. The thought of leaving her children with a similar task filled her with dread. This is where the concept of a legacy limit changed everything. Instead of trying to keep everything meaningful, Seraphina set a boundary. She asked herself, what do I truly want my family to remember me by? How many items are enough to tell my story without overwhelming them? That question reframed her relationship with her possessions. She chose to keep one shelf of books that defined her life, a mix of rare editions, a handful of children's stories she once read aloud, and a few novels that had shaped her worldview. The rest she donated to libraries, literacy programs, and community centers. Instead of hoarding for a future that may never come, she released her treasures into the world where others could use and love them. It wasn't easy. Each book carried memories, and letting go felt like letting go of pieces of herself. But she realized the real legacy wasn't the objects, it was the passion for learning she had already passed on to her children and grandchildren. The books were simply vessels, not the legacy itself. For seniors everywhere, this choice is profound. A legacy limit doesn't just apply to books, it can be china sets, heirlooms, holiday decorations, or photographs. It's about drawing a clear line that says, this much is enough to carry forward. Beyond this point, I choose peace. By creating her legacy limit, Seraphina didn't lose her story, she clarified it. Her home felt lighter, her shelves carried only the best of her memories, and her heart finally rested knowing her children would inherit love, not labor. Now I want to ask you, if your family had to walk through your home tomorrow, would they inherit joy or overwhelm? Setting your legacy limit today may be the greatest gift you'll ever give them. Choice 2. The power of saying one is enough. Think back to the last time you hosted a holiday dinner, a birthday, or even just a quiet meal at home. Did you notice how the same favorite dishes always ended up on the table, while dozens of others stayed stacked and untouched in the back of the cupboard? That's when Seraphina began to see her kitchen differently. Behind every cabinet door were 3 complete dish sets, one chipped and worn from years of daily use, one kept since her wedding day but hardly touched, and one delicate china set inherited from her mother, wrapped in tissue as if too fragile for life itself. At first, the extras seemed harmless, even comforting. They whispered of preparation, of security, of a woman who had lived through times when having enough was never guaranteed. But over the years, they became silent burdens. Each plate wasn't just a plate, it was a reminder of moments past, of people no longer at the table, of fears that didn't belong in her present life. She wasn't planning lavish gatherings anymore. Her dining room wasn't filled with dozens of guests. Yet the duplicates stayed, crowding her shelves, stealing space, and demanding her attention. The turning point came when Seraphina finally asked herself, what if one is enough? What if the set she reached for every day, the one that carried both comfort and function, was all she needed? That simple question unraveled decades of habit. She realized her mother's china could continue its story with a niece who adored it. Her wedding dishes could bless a young couple starting fresh at a local shelter. By releasing what she didn't use, she allowed those items to live again instead of gathering dust in her cupboards. When she opened her cabinets after letting go, she felt something she hadn't in years: calm. There was no clutter pressing against her, no silent guilt over objects left unused. Just one set of dishes, ready for meals, celebrations, and life as it was now. This lesson went far beyond the kitchen. It taught her that duplicates often mask fear more than they provide comfort. Whether it's towels, clothing, or tools, seniors often hold on to extras out of what if, while those extras quietly drain peace from their homes. By daring to say one is enough, Seraphina reclaimed clarity, order, and the gift of space. And in that choice, she discovered that simplicity didn't take away from her life, it gave it back. Choice 3. The decision to let technology replace paper. The first thing you noticed when you walked into Seraphina's dining room wasn't the polished wood of the table or the chairs tucked neatly in place, it was the mountain of paper. Stacks of unopened envelopes, clipped coupons she never used, utility bills from years ago, even handwritten notes she couldn't quite throw away. What was once a space for meals and conversation had quietly turned into a holding zone for paper she didn't want to face. And each time she passed by, she felt a quiet pressure in her chest. For seniors, paper carries a unique weight. It represents responsibility, memory, and sometimes even identity. Throwing out a document feels risky. What if you need it for taxes, for proof, for medical claims? Seraphina understood this all too well. She kept every receipt just in case, every insurance letter, even birthday cards from decades past. But as the stacks grew, so did her sense of overwhelm. She no longer ate at her dining table because the piles had claimed it. She felt like she was living under an avalanche that could bury her at any moment. The emotional trigger was powerful. Every unopened envelope was a reminder of something unfinished, something postponed. And yet the act of opening them felt exhausting. It was easier to set them down, to add another stack, to postpone once more. This cycle left her feeling not only cluttered but powerless. Her turning point came after a visit to her doctor's office. While checking in, she noticed how the receptionist tapped a few keys and instantly pulled up her entire medical history. No folders, no files, no stacks. In that moment, she realized the world had already shifted. Technology wasn't just for the young, it was a tool for freedom that she could embrace, too. So she made a bold choice, to let technology replace paper. It began with a simple scanner app on her phone. Instead of saving envelopes and bills, she scanned them into digital folders organized by year and category. Receipts went into one file, medical notes into another. For sentimental cards, she took photos and created a digital album labeled Treasured Words. Slowly, the stacks began to disappear. At first, it felt strange, almost unsafe. Would a scanned copy really be enough? But with time, she realized her documents were not only easier to access, they were safer. Digital files couldn't be lost in a fire or mold in a damp basement. They couldn't trip her up when walking across the room. And unlike her dining table, they didn't demand physical space in her home. The impact was immediate. Her dining table, once buried, became usable again. She began sitting there with her morning coffee, relishing the sight of a clean surface. The space felt open, lighter, even dignified. And with every piece of paper she released, she felt herself letting go of an invisible burden. For seniors, this minimalist choice is more than practical, it's protective. Paper clutter is one of the most common and overwhelming traps in aging households. But by shifting to digital, you trade piles for peace, chaos for clarity. You gain the confidence of knowing your information is secure and accessible without sacrificing your home to the weight of it. Seraphina discovered that embracing technology wasn't about keeping up with the younger generation. It was about reclaiming her freedom. And for her, scanning away the stacks wasn't just organization, it was liberation. Choice 4. The strength to redefine gifts. Every time Seraphina opened her hallway closet, she was met with a cascade of brightly wrapped boxes, untouched sweaters, and ceramic figurines she never would have bought for herself. They weren't things she had chosen, they were gifts from birthdays, holidays, and countless special occasions over the years. Some were from family, some from friends, and many from people who meant well but never really knew her tastes. She didn't love them, yet she couldn't bring herself to let them go. To her, tossing a gift felt like tossing away the affection behind it. This is a trap many seniors fall into, the belief that keeping every gift is proof of gratitude, that objects themselves carry the weight of love. For Seraphina, the guilt was real. She thought, if I donate this, will it mean I don't appreciate the person who gave it to me? That confusion, mistaking obligation for love, kept her closets full and her conscience heavy. But the truth came to her one day while dusting a porcelain vase that had never once held flowers. She remembered the awkward moment when she received it, smiling politely while wondering where she'd put it. Years later, it sat forgotten in the shadows of her closet, not bringing her joy, not honoring the giver, just taking up space. That's when she asked herself a hard question. If the people who gave me these things could see me now, would they want me to feel guilty and crowded by them? The answer was clear, of course not. That realization became her turning point. She began to see gifts not as lifelong obligations, but as expressions of a moment. The joy was in the giving, the laughter during the exchange, the smile of the person offering it. The object was simply the carrier of that moment, not the moment itself. By redefining gifts this way, she freed herself from the idea that love must sit in a closet to remain valid. Seraphina started small. She took photos of items that held sweet memories but no real use in her life. That way, the story stayed with her while the object could move on to someone who might appreciate it. Sweaters she never wore went to a local shelter. Trinkets she never displayed were donated to charity shops. Even larger pieces, like a decorative chair gifted by a cousin, found new homes where they could be used instead of resented. The result wasn't just physical space, it was emotional relief. Each time she let go of an unwanted gift, she felt a little lighter, a little freer from the silent pressure of obligation. And something beautiful happened. She began to cherish the memories of the people themselves instead of the items they left behind. For seniors, this choice is deeply empowering. Holding on to decades of gifts doesn't preserve relationships, it weighs them down. By redefining what a gift means, you honor the love behind it without chaining yourself to objects you don't need. A true gift is the memory it created, not the clutter it leaves behind. Seraphina's closets eventually closed easily, no longer jammed with unused items. And when she looked inside, what remained were things she truly loved and used, not the evidence of guilt, but the symbols of a life lived with intention. She had finally learned that love doesn't need storage space, it needs room to breathe. Choice 5. The choice to break the what-if cycle. In the corner of Seraphina's spare room sat 3 large plastic bins, neatly labeled in her handwriting, medical supplies. At first glance, it might have looked sensible. Bandages, old braces, unopened ointments, blood pressure cuffs, even expired bottles of medication. But here's the truth. Most of it was outdated, unnecessary, or no longer relevant to her life. Yet she kept it all for one reason, just in case. That phrase, though small, carried enormous weight. What if I need this knee brace again? What if the pharmacy is closed when I need these pills? What if the world changes tomorrow and these supplies are the difference between comfort and crisis? For Seraphina, those bins weren't about practicality, they were about fear of an imagined future. And fear is one of the most powerful fuels for clutter. The what-if cycle isn't unique to medical supplies. It's boxes of clothing kept in case of weight changes, tools saved for projects that never come, piles of outdated electronics in case the new ones fail. It's the silent voice whispering, you might regret letting go. Seniors, especially, know that life can be unpredictable, and so the instinct to over-prepare becomes stronger with age. But here's the cost. The home becomes a warehouse for fears that may never materialize, while the present moment shrinks. For Seraphina, the breaking point came when her daughter offered to help clean the spare room. As they lifted the bins, her daughter asked gently, "Mom, when was the last time you actually used any of this?" Seraphina froze. She couldn't remember. Most of the items had sat untouched for years, quietly taking up space while collecting dust. That question shook her. She had been preparing for emergencies that had never arrived, while sacrificing the calm and order of her daily life. So she flipped the question. Instead of asking, "What if I need this?" she began asking, "What if I never do? What is it costing me now?" The answer was eye-opening. It was costing her peace, safety, and the ability to use her spare room for joy instead of fear. By holding on to outdated supplies, she was cluttering not just her space, but her spirit. With her daughter's help, she kept only what was current, safe, and truly useful: basic first aid, essential prescriptions, one reliable blood pressure monitor. The rest, she released. Expired items were discarded responsibly, and the duplicates went to donation drives where they could help others instead of sitting idle in plastic bins. The transformation was immediate. The spare room felt open again, ready to welcome a guest or serve as a reading nook. And Seraphina felt lighter, no longer tethered to the constant hum of what if. She had traded fear of the unknown for trust in her ability to adapt when life actually required it. For seniors everywhere, this choice is life-changing. The what-if cycle can drain decades of space and energy, all in the name of preparation. But true preparation isn't about hoarding for every possible scenario, it's about keeping what is relevant now and trusting yourself to face tomorrow when it comes. By breaking that cycle, Seraphina discovered a freedom she didn't know she had. She learned that letting go wasn't recklessness, it was confidence. Confidence that her life wasn't defined by bins of outdated supplies, but by her resilience, her clarity, and her ability to live fully in the present. Choice 6. The willingness to use before you store. Seraphina's living room held a tall wooden china cabinet, polished to a shine, with glass doors that framed delicate plates, crystal glasses, and silverware so perfect it could have graced a museum display. Guests often admired it, but no one had ever actually eaten from those plates or sipped from those glasses. For decades, they stayed locked away, reserved for some vague future moment, a holiday grand enough, a celebration important enough, a guest worthy enough. But as the years passed, those moments never arrived. The best pieces of her home had become prisoners behind glass. This wasn't about dishes, it was about mindset. Many seniors, like Seraphina, grew up with the idea of saving the best for later. Special linens, unopened perfumes, new outfits still hanging with tags, all waiting for the right time. But later has a cruel way of never coming. The trap is emotional, believing that enjoying something now is wasteful, while saving it gives it meaning. In reality, the opposite is true. By never using the things she loved most, Seraphina wasn't protecting them, she was denying herself joy. The wake-up call came one evening when she sat alone at her kitchen table, eating dinner on a chipped everyday plate. She glanced into the living room and saw the glow of the china cabinet. She thought about the years that had slipped by, holidays when family gathered, birthdays, quiet Sunday dinners, all those occasions that would have been brightened by using her special dishes. She realized she had been waiting for moments that had already passed her by. So she made a new choice, to use before she stored. The next morning, she set her breakfast on one of the fine plates she had been protecting for 40 years. It was simple, scrambled eggs and toast, but it felt extraordinary. She laughed out loud at herself, realizing that the eggs didn't know the difference between the chipped plate and the fine china. The only difference was how it made her feel. This shift changed her relationship with her belongings. She began wearing her nice sweaters on regular afternoons, spraying the perfume she had been saving, and bringing out the silverware for simple dinners. Every day felt more alive, more celebratory, not because the items were new, but because they were finally being lived with. And an unexpected side effect appeared: she no longer felt the pull to accumulate more. When she used and appreciated what she had, she no longer needed the thrill of storing new things for later. For seniors, this lesson is profound. Life after 60 is not about hoarding for a tomorrow that isn't promised, it's about embracing the now. Every locked cabinet, every sealed box, every unused gift tucked away is a missed opportunity to experience the richness of today. Seraphina discovered that by using what she once stored, she wasn't depleting her treasures, she was multiplying them. Each plate, sweater, or bottle of perfume became infused with new memories, tied to laughter at the table or a warm afternoon with friends. The real waste was not in using them, but in hiding them until they grew old and irrelevant. Minimalism doesn't ask you to throw everything away, it asks you to choose joy in the present. And sometimes that's as simple as unlocking a cabinet, pulling out the good dishes, and realizing that the right time to enjoy them is right now. Choice 7. The decision to value space over stuff. One rainy afternoon, Seraphina was carrying a basket of laundry through her hallway when her foot caught the edge of a cardboard box. She stumbled, barely catching herself against the wall. Her heart raced as the basket tumbled to the floor. She stood there shaking, not because she had fallen, but because she realized how close she had come. The box she tripped over wasn't new. It had been sitting there for years, filled with papers she planned to go through someday. That someday had never come, and now it had nearly cost her a broken hip. That moment forced her to see something she had ignored for too long. Clutter wasn't just crowding her house, it was threatening her safety. Seniors often think of clutter as harmless, an inconvenience at worst, but in reality, it can steal mobility, create tripping hazards, and erode independence. For Seraphina, the emotional trigger wasn't about embarrassment anymore, it was about survival. She didn't want her life to shrink because her belongings had taken over her floors. She began asking herself a new question: what is more valuable, this box of old papers or the ability to walk safely through my home? The answer was obvious, but it wasn't easy. Like many, she had convinced herself she would get to it later. Later, however, had stretched into years, and all the while the boxes multiplied, shrinking the open space that once made her home feel welcoming. The turning point came when she cleared just one corner. She broke down an old box, tossed expired documents, and pushed the empty space into the light. Standing there, she noticed how her shoulders dropped, how her breathing eased. The emptiness wasn't loss, it was relief. That small space felt like freedom. It was then she realized that open space itself was a gift. It wasn't wasted, it was life-giving. From that moment forward, she redefined what she valued. No longer did she measure her home's worth by how much it held, but by how well it allowed her to live. Wide walkways, clear counters, uncluttered rooms, these became her treasures. Each time she removed something unnecessary, she gained not emptiness, but peace. This choice, valuing space over stuff, became her greatest safeguard. With fewer obstacles, her risk of falls decreased. With clear rooms, she found herself moving more freely, even exercising in spaces that had once been blocked. With open floors, she could invite her grandchildren to visit without worrying about their safety. And emotionally, she discovered that she didn't miss the things she let go of, she missed the calm they had been stealing from her all along. For seniors, this decision may be the most important of all. Stuff can be replaced, but mobility, safety, and independence cannot. Every box sitting in a hallway, every stack teetering in a corner, carries a hidden cost. It's not just clutter, it's a barrier to living fully in the years when freedom matters most. Seraphina's near fall became her wake-up call, and her victory was choosing space over accumulation. By clearing away what she didn't need, she made room not just for safety, but for joy, for family gatherings, for quiet mornings, for the confidence of knowing her home supported her instead of endangering her. In the end, she discovered something profound. Possessions may fill a room, but it's open space that fills a life. And valuing that space became the most powerful minimalist choice she ever made. When Seraphina finally stood in her living room after months of steady change, she barely recognized it. The heavy weight of bins and stacks that had once pressed in on her spirit were gone. Sunlight spilled across uncluttered floors, her dining table was clear enough to welcome a cup of tea, and her hallway no longer threatened her safety with boxes she meant to tackle someday. What had once looked like a house of memories now felt like a home built for living. She realized then that minimalism had never been about erasing her past, it was about protecting her future. Every choice she made had carried more than practical results, it had rewritten her relationship with aging. By setting a legacy limit, she removed the burden her family might one day face. By embracing the power of one is enough, she learned that duplicates were stealing space, not providing security. By letting technology replace paper, she reclaimed her dining room and her peace of mind. By redefining gifts, she freed herself from guilt that had hidden in closets for decades. By breaking the what-if cycle, She discovered that outdated fears had been robbing her of calm. By using before storing, she turned ordinary days into celebrations. And by valuing space over stuff, she gave herself the gift of mobility and safety in her most precious years. The transformation was not just physical, it was emotional. Her home became lighter, calmer, and safer, but so did her heart. She no longer felt trapped by her belongings or haunted by the decisions she had postponed for years. Instead, she felt in control, prepared, and deeply proud of the sanctuary she had created for herself. That sense of empowerment is what minimalism truly offers seniors. It's not about loss, but about reclaiming freedom. And perhaps the most beautiful part of Seraphina's journey is this: she discovered joy not in the things she had stored away, but in the life she could now live without them. She could welcome her grandchildren into wide, open spaces. She could cook at her dining table again. She could walk without fear of stumbling. And most of all, she could rest easy knowing her legacy would not be one of clutter, but of clarity and love. Now I want to turn the question to you: which of these 7 choices would change your home the most? Is it setting limits on what you'll pass down, or daring to finally use what you've been saving? Share your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. And if Seraphina's story gave you courage, don't keep it to yourself. Hit like, share this video with a friend over 60 who may need this message, and subscribe to Wise Aging Seniors. Because your home should not trap you in your past, it should protect your freedom, your future, and the life you've worked so hard to enjoy.